Middays with Mannix and Mannix on this Mannix Monday here on the Big Jab, 92.5 and 96.3. Hobbs and Eli are here in an hour, starting the PM Jab at 2 o'clock. We'll speak with Earl Anderson, the boys basketball coach at Nokomis High School in Newport. That's the home of Cooper Flagg, one of the biggest stories in high school basketball in the state of Maine here this season. So that's about 25 minutes away. But right now it's time to talk football with former college football coach Malik Hall. His stops include UMass, Penn, and Bates. How you doing on this Monday, Malik? It's National Championship Day.
Let's go, boys. It's the Natty Mondays. How we doing?
Doing really well. Why don't we start there, I suppose, because it's an all-SEC matchup. We talked about it a little bit here last week, but now it's day of the game in Indy at Lucas Oil Stadium, Alabama and Georgia. Oh, it should be an interesting one.
It will be. I tell you what, I went into the lab, turned on the film, put the big projector on, and I just went back and looked at these two teams. They're very similar. Obviously, Kirby cut his teeth under Saban, but looking at it, the Bulldogs' defense is legit. But when I went back and looked at the stat line, here's a stat of did you know? Bama has 52 sacks versus Georgia's 45 sacks on the year.
Okay.
Tackles for loss, and obviously I'm a defensive lineman at heart, so I'm coming from a defensive lineman standpoint for all you skill guys out there. But tackles for loss, Georgia's not in the top 25. Alabama has 112. And so, the traditional stat lines, Georgia holds very well. Points allowed, rushing numbers, all of that. But the kicker that stood out to me is offensively, Alabama just has more weapons. At the end of the day, you got a Heisman Trophy winner, and then you add into Robbins Jr., the redshirt senior, who has like 1,200 yards plus this year. So countering the Alabama explosive offense and the mundane Georgia offense, I really think is up to the Georgia defense to pull off an upset. Though I hear some people have Georgia as the favorite, but I just don't see Georgia having enough offensive firepower. I think Ben is a good player, don't get me wrong, but those running backs carry the load. You have Zamir White, James Cook. They both have 500-yard plus of rushing in one season. But the bright spot of their offense is that tight end, the Georgia tight end, Brock Bowers. He has 12 touchdowns on the year. He's leading the team in reception and in touchdowns. I can't think of the last tight end to do those numbers in college. But that kid's a player. He'll be playing on Sundays, that's for sure. But I have Bama. I'm going to go out on a limb and say a 28-31 Bama.
Yeah, well, I don't even think that's out on the limb there, Malik. That's right on par, I think, with what a lot of people are saying. I want to even let's dive into a little bit about this Natty because you brought up Brock Bowers, and before I move on to some of the Alabama guys, you're right. I mean, he set the 2021 school single season record. He broke that was established by wide receiver Terrence Edwards in 2002 with those 11. That was his record of 11. That 12 broke it. So I mean, he owns the school's touchdown receptions record now in a single season as a tight end, which I think goes to your point of how impressive he was at that position, really excelling and basically kind of being that wide receiver go-to guy for Georgia. But on the Alabama side, a lot of people talk about Brian Robertson Jr. from what we saw in the playoff. But I look at Jamison Williams, the wide receiver for Alabama here, a guy who's got 1,500 yards, 15 TDs on 75 receptions. He's literally only behind Devontae Smith and Amari Cooper in like all the statistical categories. To me, this guy's a huge X factor in tonight's game.
It's not even that's the part that I was trying to speak to, and if I wasn't clear, I just don't see any offensive weapons on Georgia's ball club right now that can push that Alabama defense like you were speaking to. I listen, if the quarterback didn't win the Heisman, that receiver may have won the Heisman. And for whatever it's worth, look, you're going to get a certain kind of play out of Alabama. That's something that we all know. And I know Kirby is getting beat up because he hasn't gotten over that hump, but very few have. You know what I mean? Who's beat Nick Saban in a title game? You know what I mean? It's only 3 teams off the top of my head I can think of. And so, look, they have their hands full, but I wish the Bulldogs all the best. But from the Alabama running game to the receiver threats, and not to mention the quarterback, who's not a runner by trade, but he can scoop. I think there's just too many weapons, but I think the defense can hold it. But I just don't believe that Georgia Bulldog offense has enough firepower.
And, I think we're kind of at a point in college football with Alabama being so good here for so long. I mean, it's almost feels like for a little while the NFL did with until somebody knocks off Belichick, Brady, and the Patriots, they're kind of the favorite. That's the way I'm feeling about Alabama now. Until somebody does it, and does it more than once almost, since we saw Clemson do it a few years ago and then not be able to do it again, I kind of feel like until somebody really knocks Alabama off the perch, they're not going anywhere.
No, I agree 100% with you, Jeff. I had a conversation earlier this morning. Georgia's window, since Georgia had a window to win a national championship, and that as a program, I heard a stat they've never won a Natty. But when you think about, they weren't winning during Bear Bryant's tenure. That wasn't even close. Okay, so that's off the table. And so that little tenure that they had where Florida State, Bobby Bowden, Spurrier, and Miami, those 3 teams all had a little run where it was open for anyone in the South or anyone in college football. And Georgia didn't make that play. Right now, I agree with you, Jeff. If they can beat Alabama, or if the bracket expands itself where you hope someone catches Alabama slipping, because law of averages is legitimate. You know what I mean? They have to. Right now, the playoff is set up 1 game and you're in, which I get. But if you add 4 more teams in that, the matchups may change. You may draw Auburn, and Auburn always gives Alabama a fit. And so I think the natural path to Alabama coming off of the top of the pyramid will have to come really with some rule changes in the greater picture of the bracket, but still, Saban's still going to do what he does and put a great team and a great ball club together. And with the national letter of intent and all of the money involved there, it's creating more it's making the programs who have money have more money and keep money, and those who don't, the separation between the two is going to continue to grow. But that has nothing to do with really how Nick Saban handles business. And so I agree. People want to see Alabama lose, but I don't know that there's a team right now who can consistently beat them and match their execution.
Yeah, especially, again, you mentioned it, the prestige. 13 national championships have been awarded to Alabama since 1936. So that's the most, 5 more than any other program in that span, if that just goes to kind of explaining how dominant this team has been throughout the years. And to go to your point, too, with recruits and stuff, Alabama just continues to load up, and Bryce Young is the next example of it. It's crazy to look at his numbers. He's second on the SEC single season list, only behind Joe Burrow in yards thrown and touchdowns too for SEC records. So having an incredible year, unless obviously Broadway Joe hadn't set those immaculate records back with LSU of the 60 and 5,000, which is the 5,600 yards. I still wonder when that'll be touched because it's just an incredible feat to get to with 60 TDs. Again, Bryce Young being second with 46 and 4,500. But what impresses you about Bryce Young, and do you think that after this title run here with Bama, if he's able to complete it, what do you think his trajectory is going into the NFL?
He's Bryce is not a big dude, guys. Like, you're talking, they may have him listed as 6 feet, but I'm going to go on a limb and say he's a 5'11" kid, maybe 190, 185 pounds. But what I love most about him is he doesn't rattle. But think of an Alabama quarterback you've seen rattle before. From under Nick Saban, I mean, we're watching Mac Jones. For whatever it's worth, they lost, but he didn't seem rattled. He seemed like he was under control, and that part is a nuance about the quarterback position that you can't necessarily evaluate. You can't benchmark it. And when you have great players around you, now you kind of get dinged for being a manager, but in some regards, that's not a bad thing. You know what I mean? Like, I know we're going to shift to the NFL at some point, but, for whoever is a manager, whoever has a rocket for an arm, the guy who got the most Super Bowl rings didn't get categorized as a rocket arm.
Talking football with Malik Hall, former college football coach. And before we go to the NFL here, I want to ask you, too, North Dakota State just won another FCS national championship this weekend, just dominating Montana State 38-10. This is North Dakota's 9th FCS national championship in the last 11 years. Is it time, Malik, for North Dakota State to move up to the FBS?
I'm going to be one of the guys. Like, listen, I want to be the guy to say, stay where the gold and the milk and honey is flowing, okay? I don't know what – I took a visit to North Dakota when they were Division II. I don't know what North Dakota is doing, but they figured it out. And so to go up and be in the play with the big boys, why not dominate where you are? I think at some point, I think the allure and the money is a lot. And so I think they may just as well make that jump. But kudos to them. Kudos to their program. And listen, this is their second 10-year head coach. Excuse me. Yes, third 10-year head coach. And so they figured it out as an administrative team and football club. So kudos to North Dakota.
Yeah.
And they're playing a rival, Montana State, which I guess it sets the tone for tonight's game a little bit.
Yeah, it might here. Although I doubt tonight's game will be as much of a blowout as North Dakota State blowing out Montana State here earlier this weekend. Let's go over to the NFL, and I'm interested here from you just because we do get coaching changes. I'm still stunned that Brian Flores got fired, but of any of the NFL openings right now, if you were somebody who was going for an NFL job, which one that's open intrigues you the most?
Initially you would say the Miami job because I think they have some pieces down there. I think they're trying to work out the quarterback situation to really get the most out of those pieces. But looking at it, I really like the Vikings. Zimmer, I love Zimmer. I think he did a great job. I think the Vikings, they were always in it. They were always competing for it. They played a hard-nosed brand of football and transitioning not one or I think 3 quarterbacks total since Zimmer got there. And so I think that is a job that is probably a little more plug-and-play ready, if you will. I think the Dolphins' job is going to be interesting because now they have to offload Tua. That's going to be a challenge. I like the Bears. I love the Bears, and I don't want to start rumors, but I could very well see Jim Harbaugh leaving Michigan to go into the Midway and be that Chicago Bears head coach. It makes sense. I think they got as far as they could go. I love Michigan. My dad, rest in peace, would hate to see Harbaugh leave, but I think you got to know when the bread is almost stale. And I think that's where he is. He either has to find a new trend, a new way, or reset the deck in the NFL again.
Well, and looking at some of these coaching jobs, too, obviously Vegas being on the list, too, and making the playoffs, do you think that if any coach, which is the most appealing, not just for Flores, but any, I mean, to me, Vegas sticks out, but also I really love that job in Minnesota, I think the most for me, but, I mean, Vegas looks pretty good, too, now out there in the playoffs.
No question. Listen, I think Vegas right now, from us to the media to everywhere else, it's hard to really discuss Vegas right now because of all of the turmoil they're under. Mm-hmm. Listen, the Raiders were a good ball club before Gruden left. They managed to kind of stay relevant amongst all of that noise and came out. Who would have thought? And I'm not so sure that the Bengals-Raiders game is going to be a no-brainer for the Bengals. The Raiders rushed the ball for 180-something yards the other day. And the Bengals gave up 170-plus yards. So I think the Raiders is a good job, a great job. I think it's a difficult job right now for whomever takes it because that noise is not going to end in the offseason. And you certainly have to be a manager of people more than a manager of plays in that situation, I think.
Certainly looking ahead to Wild Card weekend, I see an awful lot of games where I feel like the road team might actually win. I think maybe the only one, sorry, Taylor, that I don't see it as a possibility is Philly going to Tampa and winning. But other than that, I mean, even Pittsburgh, I think, might have a chance of going to Kansas City and beating the Chiefs. Do you think we could really see some upsets here this coming week, Malik?
Absolutely. Hey, Tay, I'm going to call this upset for you. The 49ers will probably go – not probably. 49ers I see beating the Cowboys. That's a bad matchup for the 49ers, for the Cowboys, because of how that offense gets after it. I really think that's going to be the matchup upset. Listen, Big Ben, I love Big Ben. I do not think they can go in. Is it Arrowhead Stadium?
Arrowhead,
or going to the Chiefs Arrowhead?
Yep.
I do not see them going into Arrowhead getting a W. But here's another one. I do see the Cardinals beating the Rams too. Mm-hmm. And so I agree. I think it'll go 50-50. Hey, it may go 100%. Who knows? In this NFL year, outside of the Eagles, Tampa, that's the only no-brainer, I think, on the schedule this coming weekend.
Yeah, and, of course, Pat's Bills coming up on Saturday. Third time for these two AFC East rivals to meet. New England's maybe not necessarily playing great going in, although I don't think Buffalo really is either. So I guess third time to decide who wins for the year.
This is like the Drago-Rocky match that we all wanted to see for the third time a little bit.
Yep.
Listen, look, Bill Belichick will have a great game plan. That defense will be rocking and rolling. At the end of the day, if they can keep the Bills from going down quick and scoring, I think the Patriots will be in position. Like we saw this past week, they went down 2 possessions and 2 touchdown possessions nonetheless, and they had to fight their way back. They're always going to be a ball club that can fight their way back into a game, but we have yet to watch them win that kind of game yet. And so as long as they can stay on time and down the distance and the sticks, not have any crazy turnovers, they should be okay. I think the Bills is the team that has to prove it. Josh Allen, this is his 4th, 5th year. I know he's been in the playoffs more than half of his time in the NFL. So he now has to be a proven guy. Statistically, he has it. But the NFL judges quarterbacks by their wins. and their wins in the playoffs. And their wins in the playoffs hopefully equals them out to a Super Bowl.
Well,
and so that's what he has to do. No, you're good.
Before I let you go, I want to know real quick, too, for you from the start of the season. Obviously, we all have our own ideas of how things are going to go. Who was your biggest disappointment and biggest surprise in the NFL season now that we're on our way into the playoffs?
My biggest disappointment right now is the Rams.
Really? Even though they made the playoffs?
Oh, my God, because of Stafford. Like, listen, guys, you guys don't understand. I'm a Detroit Lion guy. So when we got him out of town, I'm like, look, all I want for him in his career is to prove to me and everyone else he is not a jive turkey. But right now, it looks like he's going to become the jive turkey. He's been a disappointment. The second team of surprise, I got to tell you, again, is the Bengals. Like, the Bengals, for what they've been able to do, and they do not run the ball, and they're the surprise. To say they're going to do it all on the arm of Joe Burrow, and he was hurt this year, and they were still able to hold the line for when he got back, that's the biggest surprise on the win side. The biggest disappointment for me is the Rams. Oh, my goodness.
All right, Malik Hall.
I'm sorry, I was getting a little upset there, guys.
No, you're good. You're good, man. You're good.
Lions PTSD is real if you're a fan or ex-player, and so you just kind of activated me a little bit there, Tay. That's all. I'm sorry
you're good,
about that.
man. Hey, trust me, it's all welcome. We love the passion on here, my man.
Yes, absolutely. Malik Hall, we appreciate your time. We'll break down the national championship game as it happened and Wild Card Weekend with you next Monday.
Love it, guys. Enjoy the week and enjoy the football. This is the last leg of the football season, so I'm excited.
All right. Thanks so much. Again, that's Malik Hall, former college football coach, joining us for Talkin' Football with Malik Hall. We will come right back. We'll be joined by Earl Anderson, the boys basketball coach at Nokomis High School in Newport. He coaches Cooper Flag. So that's coming up right after this. Stay with us. It's Middays with Mannix and Mannix.